Welcome to your Mamamoon Podcast, with interviews and tips from real life for your pregnancy journey from belly to baby.
We are Tessa and Nina, and we are passionate about motherhood. Our goal is to give you tools towards a beautiful and empowering experience during labor and a smooth entry into life as a mom.
Hi, welcome to this new episode of Mamamoon Podcast. Today we are super excited. We have with us Marieke with us. She's been working in women's health for the last 30 years, if I'm correct. First as a midwife, and since 2013 helping women with a very important, rewarding, yet challenging and often sensitive topic, which is breastfeeding. And that's also what brought us here to you. So Marieke, super nice to have you with us. Really happy. And before we start, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I will. Well, first of all, I'm really happy to be here. Just like we talked earlier a bit about, building a tribe, building a village, and that's what I really love doing. And I discovered that almost more after I stopped my practice as a midwife. So I worked as a midwife for about, since 1995. I can't count anymore. So I'm very old. I'm about 50 years old now, although I feel like 16 still sometimes. And I've got two kids, teenagers, 16 and 18, whom I breastfed, and I learned a lot from them, also feeding them. So there's maybe my fascination also started with feeding my own child, and then I also got more intensive interested in guiding parents while I was a midwife. So I was already interested in breastfeeding, but I will tell more about that. Besides that, I live in Amsterdam. My business is called Mamamoon, and the Minds is also because I also studied to be a counselor. So as a midwife, I was also very interested in the process, in what works, why some mothers they get stronger and some mothers get blown off their feet, and what's the process to coach and to counsel. So I did a 2 years of counseling, schooling. I didn't I didn't have a certificate. But, I did the study, and so I'm fascinated also with the process. So that was one part what I did, and I did a schooling degree, so to teach, and so I always want to learn more. But that's a bit of my background, and I'm a singer, so I'm on stage all the time. So I love performing, although I can't now really. But so that's maybe a bit of me.
Amazing.
About me, yeah. And,
So cool.
Now I work full time as being a lactation consultant since 2013 about. Wow. And we lived in Australia, so maybe for half a year. There I also was together with a lactation counselor. And I learned a lot from her, and then I was slowly transforming from being a midwife to being a lactation counselor actually, and or a consultant. I miss those words a bit. So that's where my accent sometimes comes from.
Amazing. So you already quickly touched upon your switch of career, which I think is amazing when you've worked as a midwife and you've even co-owned a midwifery practice in Amsterdam, and then you decide to switch careers. Well, not entirely, but really focus on a completely different aspect of mom care and postpartum care. So, what brought you to switching to full-time lactation consultant? You already said there were a lot of things. What was the the struggle or?
No, not really. It was not really a decision, although it was a decision to stop my own practice. But that was because I was more busy managing the practice than with my work. So I loved my midwife work, and I just at a certain point decided to it was enough to not manage the business all the time. And that point I had some time and possibilities to study and to go abroad. So we went abroad, and I decided to get my degree as a lactation counselor because I was so interested, and I thought I already knew a lot I thought, let's just get the paper, you know, I know everything already. I'm so good in supporting breastfeeding. And then I discovered that I had to learn so much more. And I learned so much from working with a lactation consultant in Australia. And then I got back in Holland. I started a study to get my certificate as a IBCLC, and that took a year. And then in that year, I also decided to also jump into learning about counseling. So I started my counsel studies coaching for 2 years actually. So then more and more, I had my degree as a lactation consultant, and in the beginning, I combined both topics. I worked as a midwife. I specialized in trauma as a counselor, and I did some breasts. And then more and more, my work in breastfeeding, supporting breastfeeding, was taking more hours and brought me a lot of fulfillment without the nightly hours of being a midwife. And so my business grew. And that's where I slowly, and it made me very happy. So it was not really like a decision, but I discovered something that made me very happy and was not as night, you know, shifty and, well, stressful. Stressful, you know, in kind of very hard working as a midwife. So that was kind of a slowly transition. And
I love those stories, you know, like when you kind of find out that you're sparkle, and then it's sort of like, and then you follow, and it's beautiful. And I have to say, because I love staying in touch with my students when they're pregnant, but also after, you know, I love babies, so I'm like, I cannot keep on making babies, so I kind of, you know, borrow the cuddles. And when we meet, they so often mention that actually they underestimated breastfeeding. That if they and especially if we have any kind of get together with moms, where you have moms to be and new moms, and it comes up so often. So I'm just wondering, is there what women can do when they are pregnant to still to prepare? Is it like a course, or read a book, or maybe some, I don't know.
Yeah, well, of course, I also provide courses. So a good preparation in pregnancy, or part of preparation in pregnancy, is following a course, I think. And there's a lot of courses available, either live normally or online. And that might be part of it. A lot of times it's about 2 hours, or maybe 2 times 2 hours, to prepare and get a lot of information, if that's your style. And if it's not your style, you might choose for a book, or follow some information sources on like a Facebook or Instagram. But yes, the other hand is that I say, like, you don't really need a course like to succeed in the course and have a certificate and then you can breastfeed. Of course, a lot of things you can do together with your child, but also you need support. And that's why you maybe need something like a course or information, because we don't share our breastfeeding story that much with other moms. You're not on the couch anymore doing it together, copycatting. Like, how do you do it? Show me, just show me. See examples, but also share knowledge, or to hand over your child to someone else. So we're missing the tribe, and that's why you maybe can choose for a course, indeed. And there's some certain issues that it's wise to prepare the breastfeeding story, maybe with some like medical issues. It might be when you have like a breast operation before, like enlargement or reduction, or some other issues or health issues, like diabetes, that might play a role in breastfeeding afterwards. So then it might be a good decision to have a prenatal session, like a personal session with a lactation consultant. But
would it be also, if you know, for example, that you go for a C-section? Because that's often, I think, when I hear students struggling, is very often, so it would be
part
wise
of the story. But the thing is, not always, you know, because it's so complex. There's so many reasons to have a C-section, or to have an early C-section or not, and then what kind of breasts belong to that story and baby and things. So yes, it is part of it. So if you know that you have a very early induction, or there's more medical issues, it might be good to consider a personal session, and otherwise one group session, or to inform yourself about breastfeeding, what is realistic. Yep.
There's also so little in the normal birth preparation courses, right? It's just touched upon and flown by, and then people think they're prepared. And from my own experience, I was nothing prepared, not at all.
And still also some like old-fashioned way of thinking about breastfeeding. So yesterday I was doing a course online, and she one of the students or participants shared that she just had covered the breastfeeding story in her pregnancy course, and then they were still talking about foremilk and hint milk and those things. Sometimes the basic information is shared in pregnancy courses, but not always professionally.
I think we're at a good point already to dive in a little bit, because one thing that we found out when we started Mamamoon and we talked to moms. I mean, Kasia is originally from Poland. I'm originally from Germany. We've got students and Mamamoon moms from all over Europe, and even as far as the US. And every time we talk to them about breastfeeding, we see that the advice around breastfeeding, and especially nutrition, during live podcasting with the babies. That's how Mom Life works for everyone out there listening. But what we found is that especially the stories and advice and myths around what you can and can't eat when you breastfeed sort of differ from country to country, right? Can you help us bust some myths there and give us professional advice instead of the old-fashioned legends?
Well, there's a lot of legends, and indeed sometimes some of those legends are based on truth or experience. But to be in general, you don't need a diet. So all those things that you cannot eat in pregnancy, like the raw meat and the raw fish, you can do that again when you breastfeed. And besides the obvious things like some medication, to name out some medication. And maybe drugs and alcohol, those things are restricted, but you don't need a diet. And in general, we can say, like, if you have a normal diet, you can keep, and you had that while being pregnant, you can just continue with that. So also when you use a lot of like spicy food or a lot of garlic, and you can still keep on doing that. But if you maybe didn't eat Thai food for like 9 months, and you start over a very a strong Thai food in the first week, you might maybe experience some effect, and then you might maybe change your diet a bit, but I mean, see the effect of your normal diet. So you don't have to have a special diet. You can eat, and as long as, like what my mother always says, like not with too much, like when I have like a orange juice addiction and drink 3 liters, it might be a little bit much. And we have to see how your babies and the bowels of the babies are reacting. So please do normal, and please spoil yourself and feed yourself while breastfeeding, but it doesn't have to be a specific diet. There's a few specifics, maybe if you are vegetarian or vegan, that you have to keep in mind. A few things that you can have a deficiency quite easy. So vitamin B12, actually, to be precise, vitamin B or B12, and vitamin D. And vitamin B12 is also important for your baby. So it's good to take care of your own levels of vitamin, maybe to check it or to supplement, and to keep an eye on that. And also to have thoughts about if you're gonna choose for formula. If you're vegan, then cow milk is also an issue, and we don't have so much research on substitutes for formula or for cow milk based formula.
You mean that if you are vegan during pregnancy and then
so if you continue being vegan, of course, when you breastfeed, and maybe when you you have to supplement, then cow milk a lot of times is not the first option. But we don't know that much about like other plant-based formulas, which means that you then maybe have to take care of your diet when you're vegan.
Okay.
So that was
Yeah,
kind of where
yeah,
it came
makes
from.
sense also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's just check, because I wrote some things down. Yeah, no, that's the thing. So in general, please eat and be normal. And I think, Kasia, you mentioned, just looking it up, that you were a criminal when you so
Oh,
my kind of, I mean, oh, sorry, maybe we have to explain that one. So you mentioned
yeah.
you're not criminal, but you were, when you were eating anything other than long cooked meals,
Yes.
what did you
Yes,
do?
that's my mother, huh? But she was here only for 2 weeks.
Oh yeah,
So
that's enough then.
so for two for 2 weeks, yeah, that was indeed like in Poland. It's really like when you are pregnant, especially when you're breastfeeding, you know that you have to eat those like, yeah, it has to be cooked, so not fried.
Sorry. Oh, I hope
It's
your mom is
really
not.
like,
I hope your mom is not watching. It makes
no,
me laugh.
luckily
I
she
can
cannot
understand.
speak English, but in this case, so we can, but it's, yeah, it was
No.
really.
Yeah.
Yeah, but on the other hand, that's the difference is also in cultures, because I was happy to be pregnant also in Amsterdam where I could bike,
Yeah.
whereas
Maybe it's
in
different
Poland
in
biking, yeah,
like the small
yeah,
villages in Holland too,
yeah,
what is
yeah,
important and what's not. But to mention, I mean, it's not really nice way of saying it, but your baby is kind of really taking what it needs, so you put
mm,
everything in
mm,
your milk and the baby will take it.
okay,
So it's also more important to take care of yourself. So that's where your mom is right. But I mean, that's more
mm,
about feeding yourself, not feeling guilty about
yeah,
what you eat for your baby.
yeah, okay, good, good. I'm very happy because I was
Oh,
doing
so
exactly
you've
that.
done well. You've done well. And
I don't know,
my
yeah.
one of my advices to also partners when they join my classes is like, feed your lovely partner, the mother feeding your baby while
Yes,
she's feeding. And please, ladies, feed yourself. And yes, it might be healthy things, or a combination
yeah,
of things. But a lot of the times moms are stuck on the couch being hungry, they didn't have breakfast yet, and the coffee is over there, and you can't reach it because I don't know why, but so feed yourself, take something with you when you're
mm,
feeding, take a moment for yourself to feed yourself, and
yeah,
if it's cooked or not.
yeah. That's so recognizable. And one other question I had, so was because we often talk about what is the recommended time to actually breastfeed your child, because I mean my so Lily's 4.5. I think at that time they were talking about a year or I don't know, and then with Miko it was 6 months. I don't remember which one, but kind of like they are not so long apart, but it changes often, like 4 months, 6 months, 12 months.
And it also maybe depends where you live and what's normal
Yeah.
around you. That's what I love about working with international people, that there's so many differences in different countries. So there's no truth, okay? We've got a lot of research. Yes, it's
Mm.
beneficial, but the most research is done over a period, or where we got the most information from, a period of 6 months. That's from the WHO, the World Health Organization. So we learned a lot from all that research, but it doesn't mean that it has to be 6 months. It
Mm.
is, we see a lot of benefits from feeding 6 months, but we don't have the research about the benefits from 3 months. But we
Mm.
can suspect the beneficial effect also from 3 months, or even one drop of milk. Okay,
Mm.
so sometimes I kind of try to downsize it. It's nothing like that you have to, but we know effect of breastfeeding for the baby and for the mother, and the most we know is from that research. And but we also know that the effect of breastfeeding is also kind of the cuddles, the bonding, if
Mm.
it's not stressful. So if breastfeeding or the process is causing too much stress, we also
Mm.
know that stress, or the effect of stress, maybe is not in balance with the effect of breastfeeding. So
Yeah.
that's where my counseling comes in, to also give you a good feeling of whatever you put in there, maybe when it's just one drop or just like 10 ml a day of your colostrum for the first day, that's already a gain.
Mm.
And well, so there's no truth. If you look like worldwide, the average of weaning a child when a child is weaning herself is somewhere in between. So divisions differ, 2 years and 6 years. And so that's the natural weaning age.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that you have to do it, right? So this is kind of more to
I remember when Miko
inform.
beat me.
Bit
It
me.
was, yeah, he beat me. It was, that was for me the first time, like, you little sucker,
Oh, yeah,
But
there was
2
no
years,
sucking,
they
it
have a
was
lot of
biting.
teeth. No, it was
Yeah,
really,
but normally it depends a bit on the technique sometimes, but they find out quite quickly that if they bite that they don't get milk. So it depends a bit. So a lot of times they don't continue with that. Although some kids have a kind of maybe typical technique and they use their mouths a bit too like tight, and then you can feel more often. So sometimes they can't help it, but a lot of times they won't do it again if it doesn't work. And otherwise they will keep on doing if it works.
yeah, indeed.
But so teething doesn't really have to do with about how long you can feed. It's not that you have to stop when they have teeth.
No, no, and I didn't stop with him, but I remember
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Oh, that's where I also discovered myself being a mom. So this was, oh, yeah, I remember. When I had one time, I was very lucky with my breastfeeding story also. So that's something maybe I also want to share with others, you know. But like, oh, I want to share that experience. But when I one time had a little wound on my nipple because of biting, I really thought like, oh, this is really painful. Just imagine you got that all the time, you
yeah.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, from
You have to
experience I
stop.
can tell it's you know, we don't want to share too many of those
No, no,
stories,
no.
but
I think
what you're
sometimes you have to
saying is,
stop me from talking because otherwise we
you
don't
know,
get to
that's
the end.
fine. No, we don't want to stop you at all. But I think it's super important to understand that it can be a challenge, and it's good to talk about it, and it's also good to really keep in mind whatever happens. It is about mom feeling good with it, and mom
Yeah,
feeling, you know, taking care of mom, and taking the stress out, and whatever helps doing that is the right thing to do. I think that is,
yeah.
as a baseline, a super important concept in breastfeeding.
But support is also part of that. So if a mom has a hard time, then the solution might be for some mothers like, okay, let's swap over to bottle or expressing
Mm.
milk or formula. But if you actually just want other support, like, okay, but if you take care of my household, dear partner or mother, so I can breastfeed and
Mm.
sleep, that might be the support that you need. And a lot of the times we offer support like, okay, just hand me over the baby, I'll manage. And you think like, but that's not what I want. I just want to be able to, you know, relax. So it's different.
Yeah.
I was just looking, I found a nice name about like feeding longer than half a year or a year in some countries
Mm.
is kind of very normal and accepted. And in other, like more like the Western countries, feeding a bigger child, bigger than, I don't know, 3 months or 6 months, is kind
Mm.
of like a bit like, is it really needed? And it's you start to hide and to do it more like secretly. And I
Mm.
found a word like closet feeders, you know, so that you really have to hide in the closets to feed, like do it secretly when it's more than a year or 2 years or 2.5 years, you know. So people's,
Oh, that's sad.
yeah, so what is normal also depends on cultural
Mm.
things. So what's healthy, yes, we know a lot about it from research.
So we already said a little bit about how to organize yourself around breastfeeding, you know, maybe get your partner to do the household. And I think a topic that is closely connected to that is also what's the rhythm of breastfeeding, right? And I mean, I know that in the Netherlands, I don't know if it's still the case, but when I lived there, a lot was about having this rhythm, and getting children to adhere to a certain rhythm, like feeding every 4 hours or something, and that was super important in caring for a young or small baby. When I was taught about breastfeeding here, then it was a lot about just do it whenever the child wants to do it, because that's how you build up milk. And so you know, if you have a fuzzy feeder, then you eat, then the baby wants to basically feed 24 hours a day. What's the advice? What is it?
Truth.
How do you do it?
Well, yeah, it's a question I often get. Like, okay, when do we have to start the schedule, or do you know, is that important? And then the basic thing about that is that schedule, or those 3 hours or 4 hours regular feeds, are because that's the regular schedule of a stomach. The stomach is emptying, and that has a kind of a rhythm. So if feeding are going well, and if the baby is feeding efficient, a lot of times the feeding moments are muscle menos, sort of every 2 to 3 to 4 hours. And if they take stretches of 4 hours, it might be, and maybe one time 5 hours, it might be that they catch up after that. So they take 4 hours, maybe 5 hours. In average, it might be every 3 hours. But that doesn't mean that you have to start every 3 hours in feeding. Yes, it's kind of a minimal, but to get milk production going, it's very good to feed on demand, and the demand is not always that clear. So some babies are a bit more sleepy, or maybe a bit tired from birth, or maybe a bit nauseous. So those first 3 days, the kind of minimum is about every 2 to 3 hours to have good stabilized, like glucoses, kind of rhythm in the blood. So very tiny regular feeds are good for the health, but it's even more important to have good milk production, to feed even more frequent. So day 1 to 3, it's good to not only feed on demand, but also to invite your baby when the baby is not coming for his own demand, and also to maybe invite it a little bit more often. So keep your baby close on your body so you can see all the little demands, and you don't know the differences yet, which is good. So with every kind of, you think like, might be a demand, you just pop your baby on the breast, put your baby on the breast, and that's hopefully even more frequent than every 3 hours to start with. So kind of the 3 hours is something healthcare providers advise, but that doesn't mean that you can be earlier in feeding, and especially the first 3 days, it's good to get milk production going, and actually to prevent like dysfunctional engorgement on day 4 or 5, when your breast really start producing milk. You see less complaints of engorgement if you had more frequent feeds at the first days. So you prevent like pathological engorgement on day 4 5 if you feed more frequent than every 3 hours. I always say, like, be a walking dinner the first 1 to 3 days, so you get good production going, and a lot of practice to get to know each other. And then a lot of the times when milk production is established, you slowly grow into that pattern of feeding around every 3 to 4 hours. And the other general thing is that if a baby is growing well and the feedings are like, you feel okay with the feeding time at the breast, and the baby is growing, then you can feed completely on demand. You don't have to wake the baby up anymore. And a lot of the times that's after like 1 or 2 weeks, when the baby is like gradually and stabilized growing, then you can let go, and you don't have to wake the baby up in the night. You might maybe invite or wake up the baby during the day to keep a bit of like a rhythm and to prevent them to catch up. So if you take them with you around every 3 to 4 hours during the day, a lot of times that's kind of a nice invitation. And the best feeds actually, or the most effective feeds, are a lot of the times when they wake up, they want to feed. Then they're maybe awake for a little while, maybe 30, 40, 45 minutes. And then they get tired. And what do they want if they get tired? They want to be close to you. So they want maybe to feed or to nurse. So, there's a difference in between feeding and comforting and nursing. And it might be like 12 times or 16 times a day, but it's not all feeding.
Yeah, it's like walking a pacifier.
Yeah, well, no, the pacifier is a walking mom or a fake mom. So it's, yes, but we don't have the tribe. So I can't say like, okay, you can please hold my child or put it on your breast. So that's why we need a pacifier, because we don't have the tribe. So pacifier is fine when breastfeeding is going fine. That's kind of my vision. It's not the truth, not research based. But there's a difference in between feedings and nursing and comforting.
Yeah, and it's good to understand it as well.
Yeah.
And I had, so we talked a little bit about the length of breastfeeding. And well, what's let's say recommended or healthy? Where do we have research? How so in the Netherlands that maternity leave is not so long, and actually talking not only from experience of my students but also from myself, it was quite a struggle going back to work and then keeping up with breastfeeding, with when you're pumping and then keeping the same production to make sure that they have enough. Is there anything that we can help or to continue to extend that, to allow those women who have to go to work, and whether it's 3 months like here or 6 months or a year, doesn't matter. I mean, like you said, I mean, if you want to breastfeed your baby, you should be able to breast. Yeah.
Well, it depends, on where you live, which country. I
Mm,
can share a little bit about the Dutch law. One thing is to inform yourself about what is the regulations in the country you live in. And in Holland, you're entitled to use 25% of your working hours, so that's a quarter of your working hours, to breastfeed or to pump. If you are like an employer, so if you are having your own business, you have to arrange it yourself. But so if you're an employer, you can use 25% of your working hours until the baby is 9 months, which means that if you work 8 hours a day, you can pump for 2 hours a day, or you can come to the home of to your office if you go to your office, not Corona time, like maybe at 10, an hour later than normally, so that's maybe 1 hour already. And besides that, you also have more time in your falls. You can also take a break. I mean, more time. So it's not that it should be your break. You just have more time. But the challenge is to start working at 3 months. Actually, in Holland, that's the case. Then that period, also your baby has a lot of changes going on in brains and growth, and like a growth spurt. 3 to 4 months is quite famous, of everything that's happening for a baby, and distracted and so much happening. And then you build up your work and maybe your period comes back, so that's kind of quite a challenging time. So to understand, that's kind of a lot to ask from your body. Maybe that's to inform yourself about it. What is realistic? Use your rights to build up breastfeeding time, to build up your work, and use the time to pump or breastfeed. That's important. Otherwise, make arrangements to maybe slowly go back into work and to combine, and maybe do it step by step. That's a kind of also maybe an advice, if it's possible to arrange that, maybe in other countries. To think about that, 3 months is indeed really early, and funny thing, I don't know, that's why we thought of 3 months ever. I think the person that thought about that regulation didn't have children themselves. But a lot of times kids are sleeping a bit more through the night before, like in month 2 or 1 and 2, and then at 3 months again they wake up again, and you want them to sleep because you have to go to work. But their brain development has to process a lot more information around that 3-4 months. So they wake up again. Yeah, funny. But that's good for production. So also to accept and to go with the flow, but also to organize it, to think about it, and to talk it over with your partner and your employer, to make a plan and to be realistic. And if you use those 25%, which means that you work 75%, then don't try to squeeze the 100% work in those 75%. So be realistic about, okay, I can use my hours, but then someone else should do that work. And of course, that's not always manageable. Okay. And it depends a bit on, like, how easy was it? How easy was your start? Do you need more time to recover? Is there any problems around? If all was very easy, maybe you really long to go back to work, but a lot of moms struggle around that time. Yeah.
That's also really
Yeah.
I love
So
that. I
yeah.
love that aspect of making a plan, because that's something that I think we see, and that's also why we started Mamamoon with the with one pillar being the coaching part. Is like we tend to go into parenthood without really making lots of plans for anything, whether that's best
Yeah.
breastfeeding or postpartum or birth plans or how we actually see parenthood and how we want to stay connected to our partners and whatever else comes along. So I really love that aspect of
Yeah. I want to
informing
maybe.
yourself and then making a clear and conscious and rational plan of what works for yourself and what doesn't, right?
And to evaluate that plan, because you don't know what is going to happen and how it's going to be. So if you make a plan like every 2 weeks and then evaluate and see if you want to do more or less, so don't do really a big plan of like a year, but maybe in 2 weeks time. I want to add something is that if you want to combine breastfeeding and bottles, like in pumped milk or formula, whatever, also after birth, you can contact the lactation consultant to make a personal plan. But one general tip is that although research doesn't really show it, in practice we see that it's good to start around 4 weeks, 6 weeks, before 6 weeks, to practice a bit with the pump, to now and then collect a bit of milk, so that you start offer on regular base some feedings in a bottle. We do advise to pump around the same time, so to keep the balance, but to keep that rhythm in, and not just once on a bottle, but to keep that practice in. Although that works for a lot of parents, it's not the magic, but sometimes I encounter or parents ask for my advice if a baby's like refusing the breast or actually doesn't know what to do with it. So if you really need it for combining with your work, then start early, about 4 to 6 weeks. Keep the practice in, and don't stop for like 2 weeks, like, oh, we're on holiday 2 weeks and only breastfeeding, and then they come back and then the baby doesn't know what to do with a bottle anymore. It's kind of a challenge to get the baby to a bottle. I do support parents there too. So from practice, this is an advice, although it's not research based.
I can be a full proof of that. Yes.
Yeah,
So I did not do that with my first.
that doesn't
When
prove it
she,
all, but yes.
but I sent my kid to daycare when she didn't know how to drink from a bottle. We've struggled so much,
I know.
and yeah, but that's also I didn't know.
Yeah,
So
so
with
to
with and with Miko, it was one thing that I knew, like, okay, baby, I know you love my boobs, but you're gonna get a bottle every day or every other day, at least once, with my milk. But yeah, it's something that, and there was no issues. There was no. He was always okay
yeah,
with
yeah.
either or, and it's just so
It's
much easier mentally.
yeah, and it's not the truth, and there's also not kind of specific bottle. It's not the magic. Otherwise, it would be rich. A few days ago, I had a consultation, like an online consultation about baby with two parents, or a couple, and about the baby refusing the bottle. And then a few days later, they succeeded to get something in, and I said, like, okay, which bottle was it? Let's get rich, But I mean, that's just to be a joke, because I don't have a magic stick, and it's just part of the process. But be early and involve your partner or whoever is around in the plan. How are we going to do it? What's realistic? And
And
evaluate the plan.
Yeah. That's great. So then, I mean, we have those moms that struggle with breastfeeding because they have to go back to work, and we also know that it's not so easy. But what about those moms that actually maybe um, have too much milk? I know that there are moms that struggle because there's just too much supply. Baby doesn't drink as much, and then those who have breastfeed know that that's not the pleasant feeling. So how do you can they go somewhere? Are there organizations that help? Is there something like donating? Sorry, I'm missing the word there. Donating milk. And what can you do to maybe tone down the supply eventually.
Well, it's kind of, two stories there. Of course, having too much milk, sometimes you think like, okay, why complain about that? But it might be really a struggle. Having too much milk, a very full breast, maybe sometimes more inflammation, or your baby struggling with the flow. There's a lot you can do about that, but that's more like a consultation, maybe with a midwife. Lactation consultant. Sorry, the midwife word is still in my system. But in general, you can say if you feed more vertically and more laid back, that's a lot of times much more comfortable when you have a lot of milk. So to cope with the flow, a baby can cope better then. That's talking about solutions. And a lot of babies then have enough on one breast, which also means that the other breast is not stimulated. So to follow that process is also part of a natural way of handling. And if you've got more problems, of course, ask for support. But then if you've got a lot of milk and when your freezer can't handle anymore, the first step might be, although I'm really fan of donating milk, I will come to that, but I want to encourage sometimes to build your own milk stock and to maybe first consider to buy a second freezer to keep your milk, or a bigger freezer, and not to donate too quickly. Because sometimes I encounter parents that donate their milk and then later on they need it for themselves. So although it's real great when you can donate your milk, please do. I will tell you where. But also consider to make some possibilities to keep it yourself. Thinking of stories like, maybe your baby got ill, or you got ill, you have to go to hospital, you have appendicitis and you can't feed or whatever, and then you need that stock, You never know what happens.
Yeah.
But if you want to donate, yes, there's a lot of possibilities, or there's a few out here. But in every country, there's like a donating milk bank system. Holland only has one donating milk bank, but some other countries have a lot of them, where you can donate your milk in an official way, which is then used for babies that really need it when they're sick, or like before 36 weeks, or have an infection. So in hospitalized settings, they use the donated milk in official ways. But there's also a lot of networks. In Holland, you've got the Moedermelk Netwerk, so the Mothermilk Network, but it's only in Dutch. And that is an organized Facebook group, which is also supervised by a lactation consultant, IBCLC. So she does the check of health, and moms can only donate when they don't use medication, or so specific things are like asked. They can also ask, so the people that ask for milk, they can also ask for a blood test. Please keep in mind that in Holland and in other countries too, some very important things are checked. So like HIV and hepatitis B in pregnancy is checked, and this is because it's also transferred from via the milk through the baby. So that is already ruled out. Depends on what time is in between that test and everything. But you can trust on that, or you can demand blood tests when you want donated milk given to your baby, and you can choose if you want to pasteurize it, so to heat it up to above 60 degrees to rule out a few infections. But you can also trust each other and meet, like not really meet, but get in touch with the women that are donating to you, or women, and then a lot of the times that's go. And there's also some other networks, I don't know yet. I just got a name because of a colleague, a doula, and whom I spoke about breastfeeding. She also mentioned for me the Facebook group Borstvoeding Donor Milk. So that's in Holland. So there's more groups, and you can also do it like via friends, or via your pregnancy group, or via your teacher like Kasia. To call out to other mothers like, I need milk urgently, or on long term, or and then organize it and think about maybe a blood test or circumstances. But yes, it's very well possible to share your milk. And
I was actually super surprised and positively
lovely.
surprised how women support other women.
Yes.
It's so beautiful. It's
But that's
really
because they
without.
understand. the need of
Yeah.
feeding your child.
Yeah.
This is why I love working in this area. It's so, we talked earlier about, it's so basic. You want to feed your child, and you don't know that yet until you experience it. It's such a basic need that you want to feed your child, so you can also connect to other moms in that feeling, I think.
And now that you also said, because it's true, I mean, the baby's born and we have this need of feeding, and when it's the first one, if something doesn't stick, right? Like, but we are not always able to recognize it because we are first time new moms, so we don't know is it normal or not, right? It's like the same like checking if they are breathing every 3 seconds. Are there any signs that you would say like, hey, if this happens, this is actually a moment where maybe it's good to ask for help as well, because maybe they would ask, but they just don't know that they should.
Yes. Yeah, well, a very important thing is if you struggle, call out. I mean, it's okay to find out and to have question mark, but if you feel like it's a struggle, or it's too difficult, or you're worried, but a very general fact is if feeding is like uncomfortable, if it's painful, that's really a warning sign. And there's a misunderstanding about that if we look into research, then I think, I don't know the numbers, but maybe 75% of the ladies of breastfeeding moms experience pain. But that doesn't mean that it's normal. Pain is always a warning system. And I keep on encountering mothers that, although they were at my course and I explained about the importance of making a change when it's uncomfortable, when feeding is uncomfortable on the breast, painful or uncomfortable, that you have to make a change or have to try to make a change. And if caregivers around you or mothers around you say like, well, but that's what's the same with me, and it takes time, you have to get used to it, or it might be 10 seconds or it might be 30 seconds that it's painful. If people say that's the right thing, then you don't even try to make a change, because people say like, but that's okay, that's normal. But pain is normally to make a change. I always say like, if you put your fingers in between the door, you close the door and your fingers hurt, it's the noticing that makes you to open up the door. That's where it's meant to be for. So I can't always say that you can solve it, but sometimes you can just form your breast a bit more. You can support, choose different direction, use your fingers. A lot of moms are afraid to use their fingers or to unlatch the baby because they think like the baby's feeding and it's okay. And then I say sometimes, but it's your nipple, my love, it's not his. So unlatch, try it again, use your fingers. And then they discover that if they use their fingers, it feels better. Sometimes it's about technique, but also to allow yourself to make a change. And if you can't change it, ring a bell. So believe yourself, believe your nipples, save your nipples. It's very important. If you worry about the swallows, if you don't see your baby like swallowing the first 3 days, if you don't see difference, if you don't see any milk, that's also something to get a little bit more hands-on. So in general, if you feel the need of support, please ring a bell. You don't have to wait until you die. Being supported is very normal. And you can reach out maybe first to the people around you, the nurse or the midwife, but then still, if you feel you need more support, reach out to a lactation consultant or to experienced moms. So don't wait too long. Don't struggle on your own. It's normal to do it together. But pain is very alarming. Not growing well, not being relaxed, being uncomfortable in positioning, all those things don't help. Yes, you need sometimes some time, and a lot of times just a little bit of support. Is that more like, so that's an important thing, to reach out when you feel it's not going okay or it's more difficult.
Maybe just get the mental, sometimes the mental support as well.
Yeah, too. And sometimes some different things.
So is there a specific period in time that you say, okay, now you've tried enough, you've tried, I don't know, X weeks or however long, let's just say breastfeeding is not working for moms, or is that generally not a thing?
When breastfeeding is working or not is really depending on the story and also what is working for you. It doesn't have to be 100%.
Hmm.
So I'm always also try to guide parents in like what is possible for you and how to make it easier. So it depends a bit. There she went. It depends also a bit on what happened before. So when it's not 8 weeks or 9 weeks, it's just sometimes it's 2 weeks or even 1 week,
Mm.
or it's 6 months, and I can support. If you want support, I'll be next, close to you to support you in your journey. And it might be also about stopping, but I can't say this is enough.
I have to say that I did it much more relaxed with Miko. So I wasn't totally focused, like, has to be fully my milk. I cannot mix it or whatever. So and it was so much easier
Yeah,
mentally as well. In
because
the end, I didn't even need it, but because I kind of allowed myself in my head
yeah,
that, and he knew how to drink from a bottle, so I was also not like, if I die, he dies,
no,
because that's
yeah,
what I had basically with my first one. So it was mentally much easier just allowing myself, and again, didn't really need it, but
yeah. That's also what
yeah.
I just learned from feeding my children myself, is that although I was a midwife there already for 15 years, about or 10, I really didn't think about all those rules. I did
Mm.
something. With pumping, I didn't do a lot of regular things, and so we're just talking about being flexible and maybe not going for 100% or finding your way to maybe feed longer with a different path. So it might be that if you introduce a bottle or formula once a day, that it all clears up and makes it possible for you to feed longer. So it really depends on what happened before, what did you try already, what's your
Mm.
story, what's the support, what do you want? We can find a solution to everything. And it might be enough when it's 2 days, 1 week, or whatever, 4 years. I don't know.
Mm.
But being enough also, it touches about failure and about what is it that you want to succeed, and
Yeah.
are you still a perfect person because you were born perfect as a baby, and if you mess up as being a mom, you're still perfect, okay, because you were born perfect. Maybe you don't mother perfectly all the time, but you're also a perfect person if you make decisions to support yourself as a person. And that might be
And
also stopping breastfeeding, or partly.
yeah. And I have to also say, so something that I didn't experience it myself, also what we chatted before, I was lucky having two very good suckers. But
I, I love the word sucker.
yeah. And it's so funny because they still both, Lily 4.5, huh? She still likes me to sometimes hold her, of course, because she sees her younger son, but like close, super sweet. But something I also I came across, not once, not twice, but multiple times, is that women know about the benefits of the breast milk, yet they find it difficult for themselves, to feed their babies, or maybe because it's hurts or it's not comfortable, or that just something doesn't click. Still, they don't stop, but they keep on pumping and then giving that milk, which is, I always admire, but Jesus Christ, it's so much work.
Yeah.
Is there something that they can we can help? Because I know that I will come across another student soon who may experience the same thing. I would love to give like a
Yeah.
solution on a plate, but yeah, I just don't know if it exists, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I can admire moms that do that and pump for months or choose to do that and get that in their system. It might sound also maybe easy for some moms, but the truth is that you have to combine the pumping, so it's double work. So you have
Yeah.
to pump and to feed in a bottle. Some mothers manage to do it at the same time, feeding a bottle and pump, I don't know. I mean, it's possible, but there's a lot of possibilities. Well, one thing that might be sometimes be helpful is that although breastfeeding journey can be like really lovely and mysterious and beautiful, it's not that if you pump that you have to really like the pumping because of you're doing a good thing or something. That also brings a lot of pressure in. It does help when you feel a bit positive about pumping because then the milk flow is easier. So first tips are to focus on how to stimulate your oxytocin flow and to make it more fun or relaxed or not with a lot of pressure that you have to have a certain amount. Relax, and then if you don't have enough milk, do it later. Or maybe the moment was not right and do it more creatively with maybe a better pump or using your hands, all those things. So there's a lot of ways to make pumping easier. But the other thing is also you don't have to like it. You can also sometimes take pressure off, but just like I just have to do it. I don't have to think about it or to really like it. It's just something you have to do. I don't like filling my how do you call it, my washing machine, but I just have to do it. You don't have to feel a lot. It does help when it's not stressful. Okay, that's one thing. And sometimes it doesn't help to compare yourself with other mothers in general, but some mothers that maybe have a full-term baby and have to pump, they feel like failure or they feel like, oh, I want to do it differently. If you then compare it to mothers that maybe have a preterm baby, you can't compare with a different situation, but preterm baby, maybe 26 or 28 weeks really, or 32 weeks, then sometimes it's easier to decide to pump because you have a preemie, so you will pump. And if you then maybe sometimes think about those mothers, like, okay, they sometimes also do it for 1 month or 2 months and then go back to breastfeeding at the breast, which is also possible. So it might be sometimes building a bridge like that. If it's too hard now, or if the latch is not too painful or feeding is too stressful, you might decide just to pump your milk or whatever you can pump with a good pump in a good way of pumping, or find some support there, and then maybe build a bridge until you think like, okay, we can try it again, maybe once a day or twice a day. So don't feel the rush, don't feel pressure too much. Do whatever you can do. If it doesn't work out, ask for support again, because sometimes it's the pump, or it's the size of the flange, or it's the way you do it, or it's the moment you do. If you ask for stimulation things, it's also about oxytocin, warmth, touch to get the milk flow going. It's not that important for everyone, but it might make it easier to get a good milk flow going. You've got medication there, also which you can use, oxytocin nose spray. But of course, your own oxytocin, your love hormone, is much more powerful, and that you can stimulate yourself by massaging or using warmth and touch, or ask for compliments. I always like joke around a bit with parents, like ask your partner to compliment you, to look each other with love in the eyes, like, like, oh, I love you, and then whoop, oh, it's much easier. Or start kissing, whatever, or if you don't want to kiss, don't kiss. But it might be really the touch of love that might make it more easy. Or take a break, put your pump aside, kiss your husband, or do something with a cup of tea or chocolate, and then pump again. So
there is a magic stick there. I absolutely
but then
love
again,
that.
you don't have to like it, okay? It's just feeding. You don't have to like to feed your child all the time. It's eating, it's food. So it's a bit of both. Yeah,
I mean,
so you can
almost
compare.
an hour and a half in. There's so much to talk about, and I just got 20 ideas and things that I want to dive deeper in. So I think we'll have to see if we get you on another episode, Marieke, because there's so much more that you have, so much more wisdom that you have to share, and so many more topics that I think we would like to deep dive in. For now, if out of all of your wisdom you had to share one tip only with moms, like the golden tip that you want to give moms that are breastfeeding or are thinking about breastfeeding, what would that be?
Well, the very important thing, because it causing problems, is save your nipples. So listen to your body. If it doesn't feel right, try to make a change. And if you need support, ask for support, and think about what is supporting you. Might be a bottle, but might be also that you can feed and that someone else takes care of your household. So ask for support and save your nipples.
I love that.
Yeah,
It's really good.
yeah, it's super important.
I think. So I was warning you at the start, like I can talk for hours. I
Totally.
think we skipped a few. Yeah, that's all good.
There's so much more there. Absolutely.
I would
that we
love
can
to dive in some topics like, you know, about really what helps, tips around breastfeeding,
Yeah.
what really helps. But I think this is more about the process.
Totally.
Yeah,
I think there
and
will
we
be a
can- I
Mamamoon
think-
episode
yes.
series on breastfeeding there.
Well, yeah.
That would be great.
Perfect.
And then I can show all the things I've got, like my
All the props
breast
that you've
and my
prepared.
props and prepared.
Perfect. Yes.
I was just showing my like fake breastfeeding boob for the podcast people. So yes, you can always ask for support. There's a lot of informative sessions which I provide, but also others, and reach out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Marieke, thanks so much for being with us today. It was really, really brilliant. One of the most important questions, of course, because every breastfeeding journey is different. We already said that. So if moms or moms-to-be want to reach out and get help from you, where and how can they best find you if they have questions or if they need your support?
Well, I started with telling about my business is called Mama Minds, and Mama is with double M because of the breast. In Latin, it's Mama or Mame. So Mama Minds, that's my business. My name is Marieke van Luin. You can, I've got my website. Is maybe also in the information put in mamaminds.nl. So that's in Holland. I also do virtual consultations. So that's also all around the world sometimes. Well, that's the way to contact me. And via the website or then on WhatsApp works the fastest a lot of the times. Yeah.
Super. Thank you so much, Marieke. And it's I'm sure it's not the last time that we're gonna talk to you, because there's just so much to learn from. So
I hope we will meet again. It was lovely meeting you. It's really one of my favorite topics, breastfeeding and moms. So yes, thank you for giving me so much time to share, and hope to meet again.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to our Mamamoon podcast. We would love to see you again, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes.
Also, for more information and to stay up to date, check our website mamamoon.me and our Instagram and Facebook.